Okay, so the first part of this video might have been a little quick, a little rushed. Sorry about that. I just got so excited that it was actually misfiring. I have spent so much time into this vehicle with all the different road tests I've done, all the times of talking with a customer. All said and done, I wouldn't be surprised if I got 5 hours into this. And of course, none of that's really billable, or at least you're not going to be able to bill it. So I was just stoked that it was actually acting up and I can do something with it. And I was just worried that it would smooth out. You get stuff set up and then all of a sudden it stops misfiring. So first things first, if you're able to catch that I had the scan tool out, and that's pretty dark. Let's light that up, and yeah, so obviously it's not on anything right now, but I had this scan tool out and I saw it was a cylinder 3 dead misfire, or at least it was reporting as a cylinder 3 dead misfire, and that's the one that's been the problem child all along. We've never had any codes for any of the other misfires, but obviously then again, all the times I've looked at it, I've never encountered it actually misfiring. So first things first, I wanted to rule out, okay, are we getting spark? And I want to disturb as little as possible. So the easiest thing to do with that is the old magic wand inductive coil and plug pickup. You just place it on there and you can see a pattern, and you kind of look at the different ones. On some coils, you get a good clean pattern. On other coils, they're more insulated. You don't really pick up as much, but usually you can pick up enough, and when you compare them, you can usually pick them up enough to see, is it misfiring or is it firing? And you know what, you might not catch it if it's an occasional misfire, but if you got something like a dead miss, you'll definitely know. And sure enough, when I went on this cylinder, didn't see anything. So next thing is to go with some actual leads, and probably, now, there we go. So one of the first things I wanted to look at is, this is a 3-wire coil. So that means the transistor that actually provides the power for the spark that goes through the coil is inside here. It's not in the computer. On a 2-wire, that transistor is in the computer, and all that power goes through these 2 wires, and you can see the primary pattern that mirrors that secondary pattern that we saw in there, but it's much easier to pick it up. On these ones here, usually you don't see that on a 3 or 4 wire signal or a 3 or 4 wire coil. You usually are not able to pick up a primary voltage pattern off of back probing. The reason why they do that is they want to insulate it, so they prevent that big 100 to anywhere up to 400 volt spike from entering the rest of the system and affecting sensitive electronics. So what you can do is you can look at the turn on signal. Can you guys see that? I think it's maybe light enough. So we look for the wire that's different. We see the wire closest to me is black, the wire furthest away from me is red, and if we look at the others, we see the same thing. Black on the inside, red on the outside, and a different colored wire in the middle. This one here for number 2 is green. This one here for number 3 is white. So that means the middle wire is going to be our signal wire. It's going to be a square wave, on off, and when it's on, the transistor inside that coil will energize. We'll start energizing the coil, and then when it comes off, that's when the big magnetic field collapses and you get your big spark. So we can see that. So I wanted to look at that because I wanted to look at, is the computer telling that coil to fire? Because you know what, you could have a shorted fuel injector or a problem with the fuel injector, and the vehicles were just worried about protecting the cat. So it says, hey, we got a fuel injector issue, let's shut down that coil. Now, not likely for that to be the case, because never once did I see a fuel injector code. And this has been acting up for, I think she said, just about since she's had the thing, like since 40,000 kilometers on it. So a few years. She says it feels like it's getting worse, but you know what, sometimes it's good for 2 weeks, sometimes it's good for, you know, just a few days, some days, you know, sometimes it's non-stop. So anyways, we want to tell, is the computer telling that coil to fire? So I hook into cylinder 2, I see a nice square wave. I hook into cylinder 3, I see a square wave. Of course, I'm just looking at an individual on a trigger, and there's lots of noise in there, so the trigger kind of moves things around quite a bit. So then I also want to look into this fuel injector, because what if this fuel injector isn't firing? So on these Hyundais, they got these little clips that go around things just to kind of protect them. You just sort of pop them off, and then you can get to the wires. So same thing too on fuel injectors. You look at different ones and you look for the common wire color. That will be your common feed. On fuel injectors, that will be your power feed. So we see right here on that side is the same color, kind of an orangish pink or red. And then the color, the wire that's closest to the connector tab is a different color. So the one that's closest to the connector tab is the control wire, and that's the one that you'll see. That will be the ground. That's the one you'll see the pattern for the fuel injector where it's grounded, and then as soon as the ground goes away, you get the big spike, and then you get a little come down, and then it goes across, and you'll see a little pencil hump in there, kind of show a picture. So because it's hard to follow on this particular car, there's enough noise in there, it's hard to follow with a trigger. I put a trace in number 2, a trace in number 3 for these signal turn on wires, and then a trace in number 3 fuel injector. And I saw a good pattern for the fuel injector, so at least electrically it's working. I saw a pencil hump, so that made me, you know, the pencil's moving. Theoretically it could be mechanically plugged and just not able to flow fuel, but you know what, on newer stuff that just doesn't really happen. So okay, I got signals for both. Could this really just be a bad coil? And that's when I noticed that the turn on for the number 3 coil is not fully coming down to ground. It's staying at 2.5 volts. So then this coil here is not seeing an actual signal. It's not able to determine that. It just sees high voltage the whole way. So that's our issue. They all have individual ground wires, all individual control wires. So really the only thing that can affect that potentially is the coil, if that's backfeeding it, preventing it from being grounded, but that's asking an awful lot. So sure enough, I unplug it while I'm checking it on the lab scope, and doesn't change. It's still 2.5 volts. So you know what, that's a computer. There's no ifs, ands, buts about it. There's nothing else that can be doing that. Now, one of the things that I noticed on this particular car that I thought was interesting, there is a TSB for these ignition coils. There's a TSB regarding, I guess, an early design that was bad. So let's go over to the computer. Okay, here we are. Hopefully the glare is not too bad. So P0300, 301, 302, 303, 304, ECM, and ignition coil inspection / replacement. So it says, here we go. We got old style, new style. We got older style, we got newer style, and it says remarks. Both the older and newer are interchangeable. Color markings. Replace the vehicle ignition coil, or replace if the vehicle ignition coil is the older style and has a white or a blue mark on top. Do not replace if it's an older style with a green or a gray. Well, you know, you get some years into this thing. Are you going to really tell the difference between a gray and a white? Maybe, maybe not. So anyways, if we look here, this is interesting. So if we look at the new style, so I actually noticed something while I was doing the editing of this video that I totally did not catch the first time around. It turns out I'm actually not the only one who didn't catch this. This top part of this TSB, where it starts talking about the older style versus the newer style, and which ones to change and yada yada yada, all that business. Then it goes down here, and I read up here, it says older style, and I just kind of assumed that this one right here was the newer style because it doesn't show the boot. And when I was going through the editing, I noticed they're both older style. These are the ones here of the older style, I guess, that you want to change. The ones with this little T. Kind of like the one that's in cylinder 3. The one where she was at the dealership numerous times and they said, no, that coil's okay. We don't need to change that coil. Well, older style with white mark is that guy. Older style with green, blue, green, gray mark is this style. And if we go back, it says replace if it is the older style and has a white or a blue mark. You can read that. So if it's an older style with a white mark, regardless of whether you can see this sticker, if it's got this T, then it's junk, according to this TSB. I totally did not catch that the first couple of run-throughs, I guess. So yeah, definitely, absolutely needs that one coil replaced. Really recommend all 4 coils. I believe that's what we have the go ahead on. Yeah, kind of a confusing TSB. It's something that can really, if you're not paying attention, you can really go down the wrong route. Okay, so since we saw that our problem with the coil is that we have an elevated ground on the signal wire, and the coil is not actually seeing a turn on signal because of that, just seeing high all the time. So what are our options? We could have a bad coil causing that elevated ground. We could have a bad transistor in the computer, or we could have a wiring. The wiring is not really an option because this is a high impedance signal. It's not a power circuit. So if we had wiring that shorted somewhere, then the whole thing would be grounded or brought all the way up to power. You wouldn't see any type of signal at all because that shorted wire would very quickly overrule any transistor circuit. Or you'd see a lot of hash. We don't see any of that, so we can rule out wires. Again, there's nothing really on these ones here. There's nothing really inside these that can cause a backfeeding issue like that. Again, it's either going to pull it down to ground the entire time or pull it high. It's not going to keep an elevated ground, and then as soon as you unplugged it, it would go good, and we didn't see that. So that leaves the computer. The transistor, either the transistor inside of it is bad and it's only half close. So when the transistor opens and the transistor's powered, it's being fully connected to the 5-volt regulator circuit. That part's fine, but when the transistor closes, either the transistor itself is staying half energized to the 5-volt reference, or that ground section for that one transistor is bad. We don't really know. We don't really care. Sure we do. When we zoom into the cylinder 3 capture, we see everything. The transistor is actually pulling the signal all the way to ground for a brief moment in time. If we pull our cursors across and see what that is, a whopping 125 microseconds, a tenth or an eighth of a millisecond, that it is actually bringing that down to ground, and then it comes back up to the 2.5 volts. So that definitely is a transistor breaking down. We called for a computer and we were told that they're back ordered out of Korea 4 to 6 weeks. So that sucks. So we go for a used one. We get said used one, program it. The vehicle doesn't start. It's still registering the VIN off of the vehicle that this used computer came from. So I go to grab the scan tool and go to do the VIN write. I just kind of quickly, I don't really read any of this stuff. I quickly go through the messages, then all of a sudden it just says something, and then push OK, and I'm back to the square one. I think that's kind of weird. So I go through it again, I read it again, and when I go to the second option, where normally I should have an option to enter in a VIN, it says VIN's already been written. What does that mean? That don't sound good. So then I grab the shop tool, which is a Snap-on Triton, same thing. It won't let me write the VIN. So that's when you start getting worried. Some computers can't be rewritten. They can be updated, but they can't be rewritten. So used computers are out of the market, or out of the option for those particular ones. I've heard of that with, say, some Volvos and stuff like that. But, you know, what do you do? How do you find that out? Typically, if you call a dealership and you ask for a service advisor or a service manager, they're too busy. They don't care to answer your question. They're just going to say, no, of course you can't put a used computer in it. Buy new. You know what I mean? They can't be bothered to ask. Well, our local Hyundai dealer, they we don't get good service from them. Nobody does. It's known around here. So call the one that's 40 minutes out of town. And you know what? The guy actually asked the lead tech. Sure enough, he says, yeah, one-time deal. And I also look in, see if I can straighten this out, in Pro Demand, because Pro Demand typically has a little bit better after repair information that All Data doesn't have. And if I can straighten that out in the spot where you can see, the caution, the program VIN cannot be changed when writing the VIN. Confirm VIN carefully. And we scroll down, kind of losing my grip here. Same thing here, warning, before inputting the VIN, confirm the VIN again, because program VIN cannot be changed. So sure enough, this guy's junk. It's a good thing that we got a good rapport with our salvage yard, because yeah, we're gonna have to get our money back on that guy. So, you know, we were told they're back ordered. So, no surprise when I call the dealership that's 40 minutes out of town, the ones that actually give us service. The guys say that there's two in our district warehouse that's, you know, four hours away, next major city. So, we're waiting on the new one to come. I'm gonna be gone for a couple days, so I don't know if I'll get a chance to put it in there and run the vehicle. I was kind of hoping to get a new capture, because even on the good coils, I was seeing a slightly elevated ground, you know, 260 volts, because these are sensor circuits, so sensor grounds should be really, really low. Even 260 millivolts is pretty high for sensor ground. So I was hoping to get a capture. I don't know if I will be able to or not, but I will try. And we got a set of 4 coils. We get them from this brand here. It's just a repackaging brand. Now, I don't know how far where these guys are, or where you can get them. If it's Canada only, I don't know what their deal is. But one of the things I like about them, if you're ordering Hyundai stuff and you get from that brand, let's see if I can get that to focus. Can you see that? Well, there's a Hyundai symbol, there's a Kia symbol. If you order Hyundai stuff from that brand, typically you get OE stuff for a fraction the cost. Pretty cool, I think. Anyways, hopefully I'll get a chance to be here when the new one arrives, so I can get an after capture. But yeah, it's just a bad computer. Thankfully we can get one, because in today's day and age, everything's up for grabs. What can you do? Anyways, hopefully I can do an update. If not, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.